Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you for joining me here on this stream. To set our intention this evening, I'd like to read this prayer offered by the National Council of Jewish Women for this weekend's ReproShabbat. God of our ancestors, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, we affirm that you have created each of us in your sacred image, endowed with the inherent right to dignity and autonomy. We ask that you guide us toward a caring and loving community and a nation that reveres this dignity in each of us. We affirm that reproductive freedom, that sacred right to own the personhood of one's own body, is a fundamental part of the just society for which we strive in your name. We ask that you endow us with the strength and resolve we need, because the path that lays ahead is challenging, and we all need resilience, strength, and courage. We ask that you protect the most impacted and marginalized among us, because it is they who are most at risk. We do this in your name, O God, because we are the compassionate, loving creations of a compassionate, loving, and just God. It is holy, sacred work. May our country become a place of liberty and justice for all, and may our care for one another include care and respect for each other's rights to good and affordable health care, including abortion care, and right to live safely and securely as we each follow our path of conscience and the God we each do or do not believe in. Amen. And now we light our Shabbat candles. The blessing can be found on page 120 of Mishkan Tefillah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiyeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. We turn now to Lecha Dodi on page 138 and 139 of Mishkan Tefillah. As is our custom, we sing verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. And when we reach verse 9, if you are able, I invite you to rise and face the direction through which you feel the Sabbath bride is coming into your space, whether that's the front door as it would be in the sanctuary, whether that's your computer screen that you're watching or TV screen that you're watching this on. It's the window, you're watching the gentle falling of the snow, or your own beloved sitting next to you. Wherever you envision the Sabbath bride coming into you. Lecha dodi likrat kala ene Shabbat Shamor v'zachor v'diborecha Ishbiyanu el hamiuchad Adonai echad u'shmo echad V'shemu tiferet v'nitila Lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nekal Lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nekal Likrat Shabbat lehuvanecha Kihi mekor habracha Mirosh mikedanet sucha Sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila Lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nekal Lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat Hitorari, hitorari, kiva orech kumi ori, 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 shir, daveri. Kevod Adonai alayich biglal lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nekal Lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nekal Boi v'shalom materet bala Gam b'simcha u'b'tzola Tochem ve'am segula Boi chala lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nekal Lecha dodi likrat kala Pnei Shabbat nekal And now we've lit our Shabbat candles and welcomed in the Sabbath bride. We've set our intention for this ReproShabbat, and we turn now toward the Chatzi Kaddish on page 144 to segue us into the meat of our service. Yitgadal v'yitgadash me'rabah Adivrachim tevim lichmachutei Mechayechon uvyomechon Uchayetecho bet Yisrael Bagala Uvizman kariv Ve'imeru amen Yehesh me'rabah mevarach Le'alam ul'amei amaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yinaseh V'yitadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal Shemeg d'kudashah b'riachu Leila min kol berchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata Damiran be'ama Ve'imeru amen. And now, please prepare yourself for the call to worship. Baruch Hu is on page 146. Yai da 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 yai da 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 yai da 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 yai da We continue on page 149. This is an hour of change. Within it we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my siblings, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my siblings, or cross over? Baruch atah Adonai, ma'ariv aravim. Everlasting love you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai, our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Oheb Amo Yisrael. On pages 152 and 153, we have the Shema, followed by the Ve'ahavta. I invite you to prepare yourself for these words of Torah. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים אלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. We continue on page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there, except by joining hands and marching together. Kifada Adonai et Yaakov, Ugalo miad chazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, Sukkot Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. Page 162. Where is my? There we go. And I'm like really over this whole distance COVID business. So I want to hear your woos all the way up here in Vienna. All right. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat la'asot et HaShabbat לדורותם ברית עולם. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat la'asot et HaShabbat לדורותם ברית עולם. B'nei Yisrael, oti leolam, v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, la'asot et HaShabbat לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה Adonai, et hashamayim ve'et haaretz v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et hashabbat la'asot et hashabbat לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat la'asot et HaShabbat לדורותם ברית עולם. Thank you. I heard the woos. I felt the love. I felt the kavanah, the prayerful love. And with that, we have come to the central portion of our evening prayer, The Amidah begins on page 164 of Mishkan Tefillah and continues over the next few pages. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Eternal God, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your glory. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, U'Mevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, Le'ma'an Shemo be'ahava, Melech Ozer u'Moshiach u'Magin. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Abraham Ezra Tzara. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechaye hakol atah rab lehoshia, Mashiv haruach u'morid hagashem. Mechakel chaim bechesed, Mechaye hakol berachamim rabim. Somech noflim verofech cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato, Mishenei afar, Michamocha ba'al gevurot, Umidol melach, Melech memit umechayeh, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah l'hachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, v'kadoshim b'chol yom yehallelu Selah. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. Page 173. Disturb us, Adonai. Ruffle us from our complacency. Make us dissatisfied with the peace of ignorance, the quietude which arises from a shunning of the horror, the defeat, the bitterness, and the poverty, physical and spiritual, of humans. Shock us, Adonai. Deny to us the false Shabbat which gives us the delusions of satisfaction amid a world of war and hatred. Wake us, O God, and shake us from the sweet and sad poignancies rendered by half-forgotten melodies and rubric prayers of yesteryears. Make us know that the border of the sanctuary is not the border of the living, and the walls of your temples are not shelters from the winds of truth, justice, and reality. Disturb us, O God, and vex us. Let not your Shabbat be a day of torpor and slumber. Let it be a time to be stirred and spurred to action. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Ever-present one, may we, your people Israel, be worthy in our prayer and our deeds. Wherever we live, wherever we seek you, in this land, in Zion restored, in all lands, you are our God, whom alone we serve in reverence. Baruch atah Adonai, she'odcha lebavcha b'yir'ah na'avod. God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more, we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot. Page 178. Shalom Rav, Al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav, Al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Ki atah Hu We take a moment now for silent prayer. You might use the words on pages 180 or 181, or the meditations of your own heart. Yehi Liratzon Imrefi Vehegyom Libi Lefanecha Adonai Tzuri Adonai Tzuri Vigali. May the words of our mouths be acceptable to you, Adonai, our rock and redeemer. Thank you, Simcha. We turn our thoughts now to those who are ill and in need of healing. We have on our list for healing, and as I say these names, please feel free to add in the chat any other names of those for whom you'd like to pray. Mary Kennedy, Rosalind Cantu, Mike Haug, Lori Perry, Nick Joliat, Rhoda Wessler, Rhonda Butler, Ricky Grant, Shoshana Bat Abraham, Minna and Ira Dornfeld, Julia Arigi, Leslie White, Marilyn Frito, Anna Parias, Frank Lerner, John Solomon, Ann Cohen, Charlotte Birch, Anita Ash, Joseph Matter, Daryl Swan, Doris Hudson Trujillo, Susan Smith, Mary Lou Manzelli, Kevin Kossoff, Devin Kennedy, Herb Leventhal, Kai Bean, Gail O'Neill, Rachel Hofford, Bruce Berg, and Patty Bergeron. Scott Savage, John Savage, and Rhonda Tabor, Joanne Hines. The Misha Berach is on page 371, and we hold in our hearts all those in need of healing of mind, body, or spirit. Misha Berach, Avotenu, before Avraham, Imotenu, they the source of strength. Who was the ones before us? Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. As those in need of healing, with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Amen. At 16 weeks pregnant, I had an abortion. My son was diagnosed with a fetal anomaly that was 100% incompatible with life. I lived in Texas, where the laws at the time prevented me from getting the abortion care I needed at the time that I needed it. There was a 3 to 4 week waiting list, as well as a 3 to 4 day process. The laws had such a profound impact on my mental and emotional health that I ended up traveling to Florida. where I was able to get the abortion done within 48 hours of the diagnosis, and I was at the clinic for no more than 6 hours. I share my story so that people can know that there are a myriad of reasons to seek abortion care. I speak to share my truth in hopes that it will inspire others to act, to share, or to rethink their position or understanding. I also speak for those who are afraid to speak out due to the stigma that surrounds abortion, especially those later in pregnancy. These are the words of Dr. Valerie Peterson from Dallas, Texas, who shared her story with the National Council of Jewish Women as part of their materials offered for this weekend's ReproShabbat. We are all impacted by access to reproductive health care in different ways. While Dr. Peterson's story may sound like the obvious example of exceptions to an anti-abortion rule, the truth is that any reason to need an abortion is a valid and personal one, and it is not for others to judge. This ReproShabbat, let us explore our tradition's wisdom on reproductive health and our work in the political world to advocate for just access. Know that each of our own stories matter. Your story matters. I want to be clear that though I personally, Rabbi Liz, may not have personal firsthand experience with this topic, I understand that this is not an abstraction. There are many reasons to have an abortion and a lot of possible emotions tied up in the decision, but the judgmental stigmatization of others should not be a factor in how someone makes a personal decision for their own bodies or how they process their emotions about it afterward. Jewish law is clear on its support, and while traditional understandings may not be 100% uncritical or unquestioning as to the reasons and excuses, it is broad enough that I, as a Reform rabbi, feel 100% comfortable saying that my unquestioning and uncritical support is rooted in Scripture and Halakha. Know that I am here to offer pastoral support to any facing such potentially consequential decisions about pregnancy. I've spoken about reproductive rights before when abortion access has been threatened previously, and other times that the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism and the National Council of Jewish Women has suggested other ReproShabbats in recent years. And the Jewish law on abortion hasn't changed. If anything, as society as a whole becomes more equitable and Reform Judaism becomes more progressive yet rooted in Jewish tradition, the applications for Jewish law in defense of abortion have only gotten broader. The halakha around reproductive freedom largely stems from this week's Torah portion, Shabbat Mishpatim. Exodus 21, verses 22 to 25 states, "When men fight, and one of them pushes a pregnant woman and a miscarriage results, but no other damage ensues, the one responsible shall be fined according as the woman's husband may extract from him, the payment based on reckoning. But if other damage ensues, the penalty shall be a life for a life, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise." In other words, if someone causes a miscarriage to take place, they are obligated to pay financial reparations only. The case is not treated as manslaughter or murder, which would demand the death penalty. The other damage that would demand the death penalty, life for life, would be the death of the pregnant person or some other serious punishment relating to the damage caused, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, etc. So the Torah is absolutely clear. Causing a pregnancy to end is not murder. The rabbis over the centuries have continued to discuss the essence of the fetus and its status as it evolves to become a potential person inside the womb. Personhood is not conferred upon a baby until it is born, until the first breath is drawn, but only in the first 40 days of pregnancy is the zygote considered mere fluid, as in the bodily fluid of the gestating person. That leaves a good 7.5 months in between where the status of the fetus is a little more ambiguous for the rabbis to debate in the Talmud. Still, by the time Maimonides codified the laws that emerged from the Talmud and had evolved over the couple hundred years between closing of the Talmud and when Maimonides was writing the Mishneh Torah, by then it is agreed that if the birth is dangerous, the fetus is considered a rodef, that is a pursuer of murder. Thus, the halacha permits very late-term abortions if necessary. While the contemporary debate about late-term abortions, especially in terms of legal access, is generally referring only to pregnancies into the 20 to 25th weeks, halachically, Maimonides is talking about even that mythical 9-month abortion is acceptable if the birthing process is looking lethal and there is no way for both the mother and the baby to survive, both the birthing person and the baby to survive. Which, makes the moral panic around a 5-month abortion look all the more un-Jewish, really. In the 800 years since Maimonides, many more rabbis of all denominations and from every country with significant Jewish populations have written about what counts as a threat to the life of the birth giver. Depending on the rabbi and the school of thought, abortion, even after that first 40 days, may be permissible not only for physical dangers, but if the birth of the child will lead to the ruinous reputation of the pregnant person or their family. If the pregnant person cannot afford to care for another life, or even the cost of a healthy pregnancy and birth. Consider that the average hospital delivery now costs around $10,000. The rabbis also say if there are other mental health concerns, if the person who impregnated the other is abusive and the child would keep them trapped in a toxic relationship. There are so many reasons that the rabbis declare it is still a matter of protecting the living life of the pregnant person that justifies an abortion even past that first 40 weeks where it is still mere fluid. And these aren't all contemporary liberal responsa. These include writings from the last 300 years, predating even any denomination other than what we would now recognize as Orthodox. Still, as Judaism has expanded its understanding of the need for particular reproductive healthcare options for people with uteruses, American lawmakers are ever constricting access or sensitivity to those same needs. In 2021, more than 600 anti-abortion access laws were introduced in 47 states across the U.S., with more than 100 already enacted. This is the greatest number of threats to reproductive choice and healthcare since Roe v. Wade 49 years ago. Many of these laws seek to define fetal personhood in accordance with the lawmakers' understanding of their own Christian beliefs, enforcing those beliefs on the bodies of other people. Jewish American author Cynthia Ozick writes, "What our faith communities would be wise to choose is a religious responsibility undertaken autonomously, turning our backs on anyone who proposes that the church steeple ought to begin to lean on the town hall roof." 1 in 4 people who can become pregnant will have an abortion at the age of 35, a majority of whom have already had at least one child. Another halachic side note on this as well. Jewish law stipulates that the first biblical commandment, which is be fruitful and multiply, only applies to men, because even the ancient rabbis understood that forcing someone to give birth is onerous and unrealistic. Not just if the pregnancy has already taken place and it turns out the person is not in the right place for that pregnancy, you can't even require a married woman to bear her husband's child. The mitzvah only applies to him. And in one of the volumes of the Jewish historical fiction series, Rashi's Daughters, One of the daughters discusses with her husband the decision to no longer procreate after they have fulfilled that mitzvah once, in part because of how difficult the first birth was. A second would likely kill her. Although in that scenario, my recollection is that they turned to contraception, it could just as well apply to a case if she were to get pregnant a second time, that she would be well within her rights to end that pregnancy. Anyway, back to the statistic, that 25% of people who can get pregnant have abortions. This surely includes Jews and members of any Jewish community. Whether or not we are aware, I would hazard a bet that everyone watching this knows someone who has had an abortion. Because of the stigma around it, those who have had them may not feel comfortable talking about it or even ever admitting to having had one. It is important for Jews to support and advocate the people who need this healthcare option in accordance with traditional Jewish laws, progressive Jewish values, and humanistic support for equity and health. One more story from someone who has had an abortion, courtesy of the ReproShabbat toolkit. Alejandra Pablos of Washington, D.C. and Arizona says, "When I became pregnant, I knew the current political situation would devastate the family I would create. The same people who would force me to continue my pregnancy are the same people who would rip my baby from my arms and deport me because of my immigration status. I can't ignore the irony of lawmakers whose only mission is to control a woman's body and refuse to support us in accessing childcare and livable wages for our families. I chose an abortion because comprehensive sex education wasn't a thing. I made this choice because I did not want to be a parent. The decisions we make are supported by our own very lived experiences. Trust us. I know that when a mom is separated from her daughter, whether it is a country that separates them or an immigration prison, you might as well rip her heart out. I know this because my mother had to suffer through our separation once. I was detained in an immigration prison for 2 years, and my mom and family visited every weekend. The difficult part for me really was the fear I feel every day. I am afraid that the broken, cruel immigration system in the U.S. will tear me away from my family, from my child, if I had one. I see it every day, everywhere, families ripped apart by ICE, parents displaced by prisons, daughters in jails, sons in deportation proceedings. Fear. I cannot begin to think of planning a family when I know I am facing a racist system that is here to oppress brown and immigrant people. This ReproShabbat, may all people find access to the health care they need, strength to ask for it, and support through the experience. Amen and Shabbat Shalom. We turn now toward our concluding prayers. The Aleinu is on page 586. Aleinu Adon hakol lated gedula liotzer breshit shelo asanu kagoy haratzot velo samanu kamishpachot ha'adama shelo sam chalkenu kahem v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam va'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'nemar v'haya Adonai v'melech al kol haaretz v'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. We turn our thoughts now to those who are no longer with us in body, but remain with us in spirit. This week marks a yahrzeit for Enzo DiMatteo, Renee Shumsky, Flora Goldstein, Jack Mandel, Lester Max, Alfred Salinger, Marilyn Simon. And we are still within a year of mourning for Jean Sullivan, Carol Rubel Magrum, David Nemero, Tom Lombard, Marion Finkel, Steve McGrew, Herbert Levy, Lynn Steffen, Gary Sullivan, Debbie Taylor Wright, Mark Anderson, Samuel Fallis, Helene Skolnick, Phyllis Rosen, and Edith Herman. If anyone else has names they want to put in the chat, please do so. The Mourners Kaddish is on page 598. Mourners and those who wish to join them may rise. Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma Divrach Yiruteh V'yamlich Malchuteh, B'chayachon U'v'yomachon U'chayei Chol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala U'v'zman Kari V'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Le'alam U'lalmei Almaya, Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yit'aleh V'yithalal Shemei T'kudesha B'richu Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata Damiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei teva v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru Amen. Yaseh shalom shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. 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 V'imru Amen. A few announcements before Motzi and Kiddush and concluding. Tomorrow night there will be Havdalah streaming on Facebook and Instagram at 7:30. Sunday there is Zoom Religious School at 10 a.m. There is a youth group meeting on the same Zoom link as the religious school class at noon, and then adult ed at 1, also on Zoom. This Sunday is our last meeting of the adult ed class on humor, but you can still join even if you haven't joined any of the others so far. In exploring the themes over the last 2,000 years or so of Jewish humor, we find that a lot of themes recycle even as the jokes themselves change. So I find that we've been coming back to similar talking points and just sharing jokes. So just come even if you haven't so far. Next week is the first of the month. So there will be meditation Shabbat Friday night and Shabbat Shachari Saturday morning. February should have some things planned, but because of COVID, we're not really sure yet if they're going to be in person on Zoom, exactly what they'll be. So stay tuned for more about what fun things will be happening besides Shabbat. Happens every week, and that'll be fun no matter what we're doing. But hopefully there will be some other things that we have in the works and things that are just a little up in the air right now with the COVID surges. So stay tuned. Keep an eye on the website, the Facebook, whatever. Okie dokie. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. L'chaim. We give thanks to God for breath. Our voices rise in song together as our joyful prayer is said. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Thank you, Simcha. You're all the best. Thanks for sticking with us and being our community even in these tough times. It would be hard if we didn't find ways to gather in the ways that we do. I mean, it's hard anyway, but it would be much harder. So I appreciate you all out there letting me know when you're there. It's one thing to see the numbers on the viewer count, but the comments and all that are really helpful. All right, our closing song tonight is Adon Olam on page 625. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra mi'ein nasa v'chefza kol azay melech shemo nikra Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra ve'acharei kichlot hakol לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא חיה והוא הוגה והוא יהיה בתפארה אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא והוא אחד ואין שני להמשיכו להפקירה בלי תשתית בלי תכלית ולא העוז והמשרה אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא והוא אלי וחי גואלי בצור חבלי בעת צרה והוא ניסי ומנוסי מנחוסי ביום אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא בידו אפירותי ואת אישן ועירה ועם רוחי גריעתי אדוני לי ולא יברא אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Have a wonderful, restful evening.